Welcome to the channel. Thank you everyone for tuning in. So this is the video following up the unboxing that I did on 3 different AddiesDive watches. Now this is the AD2036 and this is the full review. What can I say? This watch does blow my mind. I mean, every time AliExpress reset, the value for money barrier or the expectation you have. And bearing in mind this is a quartz watch, and it's only cheap, right? It's originally came in at £74, but in the sales it went down to 56. And for that you get a hell of a lot. So for the £76, let's just say without sale price, this will beat your average Pagani design. And it kind of can keep up at the C-Stern level, but for what this watch is, it's definitely up there. So let me talk you through why I think that is. So specs, dimensions will be listed on screen for you guys because I covered them in the unboxing. The only thing I'll mention now is the movement. In case you don't remember, it's a Swiss Ronda 515 GMT movement. One thing about the specification also is that it is using a mineral top hat glass and not a sapphire. Now, I wouldn't be too fussed about that because I think clearly what they've done here is they've focused on the finishing, right? They've gone for a very high-end case, gone for really smooth and very consistent finishing throughout. I mean, this is, like I said, as good as C-Sterns and can definitely keep up with the St. Martins on AliExpress. And you can see where they've had to kind of cut costs. Domed sapphire glasses are known to be quite a bit pricier than your usual flat ones. And saying that, then should they have put that in and sold this for, just a bit more, maybe 130? Who knows? But this is the target audience. They went for that sub £80 mark, let's say. Ridiculous value for money. And on that basis, if you do want that quartz watch, and you're not too fussed about the mineral glass, which, let's face it, they don't get scratched that often unless you really beat them up, which even then it doesn't look so bad. Then I think this watch is definitely the next best thing. It's the one to go for because of the value for money that you see. If we look at the case finishing first and foremost, let's focus on that because that's what we're talking about. The case finishing is impeccable, starting off at that fixed 24-hour bezel. Look at that sunray sort of brushing, very fine. You can see that hairline brushing. It's all smooth. And these are the things I look at, the consistency around the case, and that's perfect, right? There's no problems there. Moving on to the lugs, again, very fine, satinized brushing, accompanied by this slick polished edge or chamfer which goes around the side of the case. Very nicely done. Just have a look at the crispness of the transitions. That's another thing which I focus on. We've seen Pagani design attempt this in the past where it hasn't been that crisp at all. So these lines are very tight, nice and tidy. Brushing across the side of the case as well, hairline brushing, very smooth, no issues there. No sharp edges under the case as well, so this is a very refined case. The crown itself is 6.8 millimeters, so it gives you really good grip. And the crown is definitely comparable to C-Stern because the threads, you can't even feel them engage. It is that buttery smooth. So there's a possibility that they got the same case that maybe C-Stern used or St. Martin, because this is the industry that we're in. This is what a lot of brands do, and then they decide to save money on the movement, the crystal, right? Definitely plausible. Case back is usual. It's got the AddiesDive logo on there. It is screw down case back with the the specs, etc. Nothing to really bother about there. Now the bracelet finishing, equally as good. Let's apply the same principles, linear brushing. There's no scuffiness, there's no scruffiness there. Everything is in the same direction, everything is consistent. Sometimes I have seen on Pagani design watches and I've pointed them out where it looks like someone's just hand kind of brushed it and they've gone all over the place. This is very linear and consistent throughout. The end links, just look at the fit and finish of that. No gaps there, better than a lot of Seiko watches that I have. Female end links, just look at that fitment there. Fits perfectly, no problems. Again, in these spots there's perfect brushing. And also the clasp, it is a new clasp that they've used. Absolutely love it. Not too fussed about the logo. It is what it is, but I know a lot of people dislike it. It's confusing, there's a lot going on with the logo, but aside from that, nice crisp engraving, very smooth brushing. You can see these polished highlights, a very slim clasp as well at 16 millimeters, tapering down from the 20 at the lug to lug, at the lug width, sorry. Yeah, and it's got plenty of micro adjustments as well. These smaller clasps usually have 2, which is a problem for me. You've got a total of 5 micro adjustment holes. You've got split pins which hold the bracelet together. Again, that price point, this does not bother me. It does have a bit of play in there, which is what you'd expect. And this is, I think, the difference between, I'd say, this and the C-Stem or the San Martin, where they have the screws and it keeps the links pretty stiff. But on the flip side, these bracelets, I do find them more comfortable. They conform a bit more around the wrist. You do need that bit of slack, guys. You know, it's not always about screwing links all the time. I do find them a bit stiffer, but it's all about your personal preference and how you prefer to wear the watch. Now, with all that gone and said about the case finishing, then let's talk about the dial and the crystal and everything else, because just based on the case finishing, £56 or £74 is an absolute steal. Now, with the movement, they've catered for the quartz, guys, and you know, it's a pick up and go. It is going to be very accurate. Now, one thing I can say about the movement, I mean, it's my first experience with this particular style, but one thing I don't like about quartz movements is the engagement, right, or the feeling you get. So when you change the date, there's little to no feeling on the date being changed. Whereas the autos, as you know, you do have an audible click, but you also feel a haptic sort of a click as well. But that's not present here. And also the GMT hand, which is kind of new to me, it doesn't click between hour markers, which you get on autos. So you can just turn it on autos and it kind of sits into place. This one is free moving, so I don't know how that works because it doesn't even snap to any position. So when you fully lock it, I think the hand will just do what it's designed to do. Okay, which is okay, I suppose, if that's normal for the movement. So if you line up all the hands, you can also see the actual length proportions are really good on this watch. You know, I do really like that about this watch. They paid attention to so many different elements. You know, for such a cheap price, it really does make this watch an awesome value for money. You've got great proportions on the hour hand. The minute hand hits those markers, which are, you know, slightly more elongated as well. That GMT hand, again, hitting the edge, you know, of that dial, and that seconds hand just sitting somewhere in the middle of that. So all, you know, hands are or can be differentiated. So let's see if we can line up these snowflakes, and do you know what? They line up perfectly. How's that? How is that? That's very good. I like that. Now the dial is mainly printed. There's nothing applied on there. You got your AddiesDive logo in the center, which looks very confusing, but this is the same criticism people had of Steel Dive. It's just too much going on, but it's been there for that long, you know, it kind of has to work. And I like that they haven't changed it, because that also throws me off when brands keep changing logos and names, etc. And then the dial is printed. We're going to see how good the Loom is, but just a bit of feedback on there. It does look a bit penicillin or moxilin, if that makes sense. If you've seen a moxilin, you know what I'm talking about. It's very yellow, and it gives the whole watch a bit of a yellowy tinge. So I don't know if you guys mind that, but to me, yeah, it does kind of mess with your eyes sometimes. On some occasions, it looks absolutely fine. Because usually that 14 Loom is a bit more, how can I put it, like paler, with maybe a bit more orange in there, but this is, you know, quite bright and yellow. Now, how does that affect the Loom? Well, let's find out. So the Loom is really good. Let's consider the price point again. It will blow Pagani design out of the water, and many of the watches at that price point. With this AddiesDive, what you'll notice instantly, there's a burst of Loom. The hour markers on the dial really respond well to the light. I haven't given it any UV interaction. I've just let it sit, in these studio lights that I'm using, and that's my benchmark for me. And that's a benchmark I use when I assess Loom. And if the watch doesn't catch enough Loom, I know how good it is in comparison to the others. So this one is quite good. The only difference you'll see here is the handset, and you'll find on cheaper end watches the handsets do suffer because hands aren't very expensive at all. And what distinguishes them is the level of finishing and also the Loom. So you can see there's a difference between the Loom on the hands and the dial, but overall it's something you cannot complain about, and you will be more than happy when you see how much Loom this watch has. So here's the AddiesDive AD2036 on my 6.5 inch wrist, and the dimensions I stated earlier are spot on for this size wrist, and bigger, maybe a little bit smaller, but 39mm by 48.5, absolutely fine. The watch sits beautifully on wrist. The female end links really do help it, as you want that second link to touch the size of your wrist for you to get a good fit. It is very comfortable as well. Notably, there were no sharp edges under the side of the case, and the bracelet doesn't have any sharp edges also. The clasp is nice as well, very refined, and I'd say there's no need for a summary because I've captured everything I want to say throughout the review. What I'll say is, if you like the looks, and you don't mind the quartz or the mineral glass, I'd say definitely get one of these, because the case finishing is very high end and can keep up with, you know, another 2 tiers above itself, and in its price point is probably the best that I have seen. So that's my final thoughts on this AddiesDive AD2036. Definitely have impressed me. So thank you all for watching like always, and I will see you on the next video.